everyone. Welcome back to the Kelsey Sharon Perspective. I have yet again another super uplifting and positive podcast for all of you guys who have been watching the show. And over, I would say, the last few months, the topics have shifted, and you guys are seeing that I am definitely putting a lot of emphasis and focus and effort into combating what I consider to be the rapid expansion of a death cult in Canada and across the nation, as well as into the United States and in Australia and the UK. But today I have a really special guest with me, somebody that I have become a huge fan of from afar because he's on the other side of the country, but somebody also who has been not only fighting for his right, and when I say the right to live, I'm meaning it in the truest sense, the right to have access to food and healthcare, the right to be able to actually look after himself and have himself live in his own home. So before we get started, like I do on many of these episodes that surround euthanasia and government overreach, I'm encouraging you to start this episode with an open mind. I'm encouraging you to put yourself in Roger's shoes. I'm encouraging you to understand and give a little bit of empathy. I understand we're all going through it in the world right now, but this is something that we have to stop shying away from, and something that we have to start paying an extreme amount of attention to, because at one point in your life, somebody you know, or maybe you yourself, will have to encounter this system. And I want you to understand the system that you've just walked yourself into. So, without further ado, Roger Foley is on the show today. This is a guy that is one of the most well researched individuals I have ever met when it comes to these topics. And I'm going to let him tell his story and just get into it. And we're going to, everything we say, we have facts for. Everything we say, I have proof for. Everything we say, we'll have a receipt attached to it. So, Roger, how's it going today, buddy?
I'm hanging in. How are you, Kelsey?
I'm great. I'm so glad we could finally get this done, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, and I thank you so much for you raising awareness about this very important issue that there isn't nearly enough awareness raised about.
Well, I'm only able to do this job because I stand on the shoulders of the giants that have lived it, like yourself, Roger. So I want you to remember that every time that you show up for someone else, it's not just showing up for someone else. You're opening the door and opening the eyes of so many people in Canada and the rest of the world to what really happens when you're in situations where you can't necessarily advocate for yourself and you're left to the devices of the healthcare system. So, Roger, why don't you go through a little bit of what your background is, some health conditions, and we're going to dive into the deep nitty-gritty depths of hell together today.
I guess I'll start with my childhood and how I grew up. I was born in Ottawa, Ontario, and at a very young age, our family moved to Miami for about a decade. Um, when I was a child, I was always sick and I was clumsy, not coordinated. We really didn't know what was going on. I was in and out of the hospital a lot. Then in my teenage years, when we moved back to Canada and I was in high school, my health started to deteriorate a little bit more. I tried to catch up physically and coordination wise with my peers. Uh, it, I thought I was lazy, so I worked extra hard to try to keep up. I participated in all the sports I could. Some was good at, some I wasn't. Some I was inconsistently good at. But there was always something off with my health. And then in my early 20s, uh, my health really started to deteriorate where my girlfriend at the time told me that I should get checked out. Some other coaches that I had been on the sports teams with had told me to. So I started to get checked out by neurologists, and they started to tell me, we think you have a genetic ataxia. And they started telling me about the different types, like there's Friedreich's ataxia, there's the Spino-cerebellar ataxias, there's ataxia telangiectasia. I was even told at one point that I might have MS.
Oh,
So it was very up in the air of what exactly I had. So it was challenging to find a diagnosis. also because after university, I was moving around a lot in the country, paying my dues in the economy. I received MRIs and they diagnosed it with cerebellar ataxia, and then they were testing my blood to see what genetic type I had. So I actually didn't receive an official diagnosis till way later of the blood type because the genetic testing was always behind.
Mm,
But finally, I have the actual tape, so I have spino-cerebellar ataxia type 14. And then I also have other health issues and disabilities that compound with the spinocerebellar ataxia. So I was born with partial fusions in my cervical spine at birth. I have malformed vertebrae and malformed discs in my cervical spine as well, which contribute to uh, the challenges I face. And I have other health challenges too, like asthma and so forth. So my health has always been rocky throughout my life, but I've always gave my best, and I graduated from university with 2 degrees, one major in economics, and a minor degree in history. And in the economy, I worked my way up, and I eventually began working for the Royal Bank of Canada, where I quickly moved up the ranks to management at a e-business position at the bank, where I oversaw all the e-business of dividend securities for the entire country of Canada. I love my job very much. I won multiple top performer awards. I won the RBC Award of Excellence 2 years in a row, and I really loved it there. And I was heartbroken when my health deteriorated to the point where I wasn't able to work anymore. So after my health deteriorated, I then started to become at the mercy of our provincial healthcare system. I needed a home care to help me with activities living at home. Uh, Living with disabilities and a neurodegenerative disease is hard enough, but what's even harder is dealing with the fractured, inconsistent, and frankly incompetent healthcare system that we have. And it's fractured all over the country. It doesn't matter what province you're in, Ontario, BC, Saskatchewan, Alberta, um, anywhere you live, the provinces have always had difficulties, and mostly the provinces self inflict themselves with difficulties and wounds of their own system. Um, so I found myself with a mess coming to my home every day because in Ontario we don't have freedom of choice of who our caregivers are at home. We don't even have freedom of choice to choose the home care agency of our choice. It's monopolized. So
I I found that out. I knew that growing up in Ontario under OHIP, it was very different than a lot of the other provinces and the country as a whole. But I did just speak with Kayla Pollock last week, and Kayla and I were having this same conversation. Roger, I'm not sure if you're aware of who Kayla Pollock is. Okay.
I've seen her videos and the
Mhm.
information, and yeah.
Yeah, so it was very fascinating because the one conversation we were having was the freedom, the inability to choose the facility and the home care that you have, and how inconsistent it is. Being somebody who's been in the healthcare system, meaning used it a lot as a child, was very ill, in and out. You could see that time after time and how difficult it was becoming to get access to either doctors or timely appointments. But when you speak to people like yourself, Roger, and to people like Kayla, the thing that I found most fascinating was when somebody had a very, and I mean life changing, causing quadriplegic uh, life term in a chair. Like people who are put in these hospitals that have negative experiences are being forced to go back to the scene of the situation. And that to me is considered, if I'm not, maybe I'm wrong on this, but sanctuary trauma comes to mind when I think of being forced to go back to a medical facility that, number one, would drug you just to handle you better, and number two, they would not allow you to go to another facility if you were brought in by ambulance. So that was a little bit heartbreaking to me, outside of the fact that with home care, she would have people that were scheduled to come and they would never come, and she would be stuck in bed with no help. And to me, the fact that we have not only done that to tax paying Canadian born citizens, and we have very gladly and openly taken in every other person from every other part of the world and give them everything. I'm I'm just a little bit, I'm beyond disappointed, Roger, is I think where I'm going. I'm beyond disappointed at what the healthcare system looks like. And then to see and meet you and know the depths of the terror that are these hospitals that people are supposed to go to heal, supposed to be the sanctuaries for healing. It has just been discouraging, and it has definitely brought in a fear when it comes to going to a hospital. And I think that's valid, though, after hearing your story. So when you went from being a child to doing the best that you could with the situation you had at hand, you got through the universities. I can tell very well that you're incredibly intelligent. The way you write and the way you prepare documents for this podcast are unlike anything I've ever seen ever. It is so important that people understand how well documented you are, because the things that you are saying are provable, and they're not only provable on paper, they're accessible to everyone if they just took 2.5 seconds to go find them. So let's get into understanding your disability. Now, understanding why this is such a problem for you in the healthcare system and the self-directed funding. Let's go there next and see what kind of pops up from there.
With my disability, Spino-cerebellar Ataxia type 14, what it is, it's a DNA deficiency.
Okay.
There's two of them in the DNA, and this prevents the body from producing energy appropriately. The other part of it is that the cerebellum, it has a vanishing white matter. So my cerebellum, the white matter is deteriorating in my brain over time, and that also affects all the systems in my body internally, also with mobility, and it affects my central nervous system because my central nervous system doesn't have a healthy full cerebellum to work with. And so the cerebellar degeneration is degenerative, just like the condition. And like I said, on top of that, I have other deteriorating conditions like my cervical spine as well. On top of that, so I have great difficulty coordinating my limbs with movement. My internal organs are failing, where even I have challenges with motility to eat and digest food. My swallowing is gone where I'm on pureed. I have to be at a certain angle to be able to swallow or I'll choke, which requires me to be in a sling, be it on a sitting track or hard lift, to be able to lean really forward so I could do a chin tuck and an effortful swallow. And I need help with all activities of daily living. I need help with transferring and everything. So my care needs are quite complex. I'm I'm definitely in the high needs spectrum of vulnerable persons. So the home care that I receive, it needs to be consistent, and the workers need to know both my home, my disease, and my routines. And in the home care in Ontario, uh, certain agencies they claim ownership from the health authorities, like the lead. Now they're called Ontario Health. That's another mess I'll get into right after this. But so for a high needs person, my health population was owned by a certain home care agency. So I would have no choice, and they could do whatever they wanted to me. No put reckless, inconsistent people in my home. No matter what would happen to me, be it I would be the workers would be rushing with hard left and bash me into walls. That happened a lot. I would report that agency didn't care. I would get hurt during range of motion exercises with workers who would lose focus. Agencies didn't care. I would get food poisoning due to cross contamination and other factors. They didn't care. I would end up in the hospital because of physical injuries from the home care agency, and still they wouldn't care. And also with the hospitals, would you end up in the hospital due to bad home care? And even if the hospital knows that the home care agency is bad, uh, it's the only home care agency that's assigned your health population, so they spit you back out to them with promises that will be better. Um, so it's like you were saying sanctuary trauma, and this is like um industry trauma of being
Mm.
trapped in our industry where no matter how much you speak out about what's going on in your home that's wrong and that's harming you, and that changes are needed. And even expressing, could I choose another agency? Could I have access to self directed funding? It's always from the system. Uh, no, and I'll give this another try, and it will be different this time, and it never
Mm.
is. And all they are doing is they're milking public funds for themselves. And it's a
Right.
system that's bureaucracy centered and administration centered instead of patient centered. So, when I ended up in the hospital most recently for mental health, was because I was in a place mentally where I had faced so much harm and injuries from the home care agency. And the only way out I felt was to end my life, to get out of being owned, being a property
Mm-hmm.
of this home care agency and the system. Um, and I won't get into the morbid details of it, but I had a plan, I had intent.
Mm.
Um, uh, I guess I'll open up a bit. Like I was gonna
Yeah.
use a what they call a suicide bag with helium, and
Mm.
I would even like I would get comfortable trying on the bags, um and so I was building towards that. And if anyone is going through thoughts of suicide, I encourage you to reach out for help. I think 988 is a new government
Mm-hmm.
number. I called it. It doesn't help that much, but at least it's help. And also the emergency department at the your local hospital. I encourage you to go there. Don't give up. Don't do it. But that's how very close I was. And I had the plan and intent, and the only reason why I got out is because my social worker in the community cared about me a lot and was advocating about me a lot, who had been my social worker for about 5 years, and she had seen the deterioration of my health, but she
Mm.
also saw the deterioration of the home care and agencies I was receiving. Um, and she saw that I was extremely different. That now I was at the point where I gave up, and I
Mm.
accidentally opened out to her about my plan, and she was very concerned. So she got my family doctor and some of my friends involved, and um, they encouraged me to go to the emergency uh, mental health at LHSC. So
S-
the ambulance took me. So Yeah.
So that's the difference right there between a doctor or social worker who actually wants to see you heal and somebody who is just happy to take you off the face of the earth. They reached out to your family members, they reached out to other people to help you, to encourage you to stay with us. Whereas it does feel like, and we're going to go down this road, the euthanasia program in this country is doing the complete opposite when somebody asks for help.
Yes, it is a complete opposite. And I know we're getting ahead of the topic, but I'll just
Mhm.
mention this briefly and then we can get back
Yeah.
to the topic at hand. The federal government, the Department of Justice, they've been tweeting out uh, made promotional tweets, and I've been seeing this, and it's scary. And there's so much made advertisement, like you were saying, that's proactive, and it like it destroys the suicide prevention in our country entirely. So
Hmm.
just to mention that.
No, I think it's important. We can jump around. Don't worry, Roger. Nothing in podcasting world has to be perfectly linear. I do promise you. But I know you want to stay on track. So let's focus and start talking a little bit more about self-directed funding. I think it's something that most people don't understand, that other countries have the right for self-directed funding for their own home care, whereas other countries, like, well, just us, don't have it. The UK has it, Australia has it, Denmark, New Zealand, the United States, they all have self directed funding for home care. Why does Canada not?
Well, I can get into um, speculation of why Canada does not. But first, I'll get into self-directed funding home care, which I only started finding out about when I was in the hospital. And when I found out about the sporadic little programs that uh, Ontario does have that are very hard to get access to, um, I also found out about the other systems in the world. So, um, self-directed funding in the United Kingdom is called personal health budgets, and it used to be called direct payments originally. And in 1996 is actually when the UK passed the first Direct Payments Act, and it worked out so well that the government in the UK then in about 2010, 2013, made it a right to have for all persons with disabilities in the UK. Um, they passed this act called the CARE Act, which enshrined that. So with a personal health budget, uh, being a right to have in the UK, you cross over into France, and France did the same thing with they call it a right to compensation. Um, uh, I don't speak French, but uh, the uh, the letters that stand for it, it's PCH, I think, but it's like a
Okay.
personal support. And then Denmark has the same. Italy does. Australia in 2010 they created the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is basically for self-directed funding throughout Australia. Then New Zealand has it. Um, uh, Ireland has a number. Other countries have it, but also for all the mocking Canadians do of the United States healthcare system, it's shocking, and I was kind of shocked to find this out. But in the States, self-directed funding is very wide and vast. It's actually through Medicaid. It's in one of the acts as well. It's enshrined in legislation, and it's called many different things throughout different states. For instance, in New York, it's called consumer directed care,
Right.
and they have also different types of self-directed funding. There's a type where persons with disabilities are funded individually, and they become sole proprietors, and they hire their own caregivers, and they pay them uh, the funds. There's also a broker model where there's a broker agency that the person with disabilities still chooses and hires their own workers, but that agency does all the administration and the payments. So
Hmm.
in New York, with consumer directed care, I think there's this broker agency called Freedom Care, and they have a uh, a commercial on YouTube that anyone can view
Yes.
of how it works, and and in Canada, not many people realize this, but we are very, very poor at recognizing disability rights and treating our most vulnerable. And to give you a systemic example of this, in 1981, when the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was being drafted, the Pierre Trudeau government, with the then Justice Minister and Attorney General Jean Chrétien, they did not want persons with disabilities in Section 15 of the Charter.
Right.
And
I read that this morning and that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
yeah, and the committee hearings are still on CPAC. If you look, you can watch them. And I found the clip of Jean Crotche um, stating his reasons why persons with disabilities should not be in the charter, because the term disabled wasn't mature enough. And if it wasn't for other MPs at the time that were putting pressure and disability organizations and the Globe and Mail at that time, which released an article, Disabled Left Out in Cold, then the Pierre Trudeau government would not have changed its mind due to pressure and put persons with disabilities in section 15. So we in Canada don't even have a federal disability rights legislation. The United States in 1990 passed and ratified the American with Disabilities Act. The UK in 93 passed the Disability Discrimination Act. Australia and a number of other countries all did so in the early 90s too, um, but Canada did not. Uh,
This episode is brought to you by Mindful Meds. I love Mindful Meds for so many reasons. I know that you guys have seen me using them for quite a few years, and there's a reason for that. When they're tested and safe and researched, how can you go wrong? This company is one of my favorites for several reasons. I use them with my clients, with myself, and with my family members. They have active ingredient microdoses and they have functional mushrooms. They're going to help keep you from getting sick. That'll help uplift your life, keep you moving, and open your heart. And when you go to mindfulmeds.io and at checkout, you use the code BRASS, all one word, they're going to give you 15% off today. So let me ask you, are you ready to join the mindful movement? Go check them out at mindfulmeds.io today.
Also, in the United States and other countries, they have the right to try for terminally ill persons. So, someone with the terminal ill prognosis in the States, they have access to trying experimental phase drugs to help alleviate them. And this has there's a number of situations in states where it's helped continue life for someone who had a prognosis of death. We don't
Right.
have that for terminally ill. They have a program called Money Follows a Person, where in the states there's an incentive, uh, and this is directly from the American with Disability Act for anyone in the long-term care home or institution for that money to follow the person into the community for deinstitutionalization. We
Right.
don't have that in Canada either. All these other countries around the world, they've progressed the rights and respect for persons with disabilities to live, but in Canada we have not. And I think it's been due to systemic bias in our governments, um, and and that also shows in the rigidness of the home and community care system, where we're treated like property and we're trafficked around as property to different agencies and institutions instead of being treated like human beings. So.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like people in Canada at this point, unless you are from somewhere else and you've immigrated here, you don't feel like a human being. You feel like a burden and a problem on the system. And that could not just necessarily be individuals with long-term care needs like yourself, my friend, but it does feel like that when you're trying to get help for mental health support, when you're trying to get help or for an orthopedic surgery, when you are told you are more of a problem and more of a burden on the system, when you're the ones paying the taxes for the immigrants to come and take all of our rights and all of our ability to do things. I struggle with it. I'm not going to lie, because when I speak to people like you, Roger, my blood boils after, because I do not understand how we are supposed to be one of the leading nations in several different areas. Obviously, not anymore. We can look economically, we can look immigration wise, we could look at the overall state of the country and the safety of it. Canada has completely lost its footing on what it means to be a safe, free, healthy society. When you start putting in hate bills, you start putting in censorship laws, you start taking away individuals' rights to live in their homes while they are going through an illness. It is a struggle, but we've seen this time and time and time again. And I'm not sure why the everyday Canadian is not getting the picture. They're not understanding that just because it's not happening to you right now does not mean that it will not happen to you at some point in your life or to somebody else that you love. And when you are thrown into the deep end, because the system does feel like the deep end, it feels like it's this never ending dark hole that new things keep coming out of. So, what I'm trying to understand with somebody with your condition in particular, why someone like microboards in Ontario or why somewhere or somewhere else cannot step up when we are so quick to give $500 million over to fighting a war to be cannon fodder, but we are not willing to give it back to the society, like the society in which it's coming from, which are your taxpayer dollars.
Correct, and I also think we shouldn't forget about the other waste of money, such as the Rive cap and
Let's talk about
the
it, Roger.
yeah, the like $400 million that he blew on that, and um that money could have been used to also improve supports in our country for the most vulnerable. And I think at one finance committee, they got a mission that they lost track of where about $1 billion had went before. So there's a lot of um, horrible financial decisions that our government has made, and systemically, the other systems we have set to take care of our vulnerable or for youth, all those funds that could have been used for that to improve those systems are lost because of frankly incompetence. So it comes from the
See,
top
See,
down.
Roger, not to interrupt here. And of course, it comes from the top down because we have this saying in the military, my friend. It's called shit rolls downhill. And the thing, just to go with me here, but also the thing is you are so, I believe you're giving them, you're so lovely when you say, well, I just think it's incompetence. See, I don't see, this is where you and I are going to differ a little. I don't think it's incompetence, Roger. I think it's happening exactly how they want it to happen, because as much as I think that the majority of our current government and the one up against it, because let's not pretend like the liberals and the liberals and the conservatives are super different. They're kinda, but not really politically. Canada doesn't make the same sort of moves like the United States does with bringing in, like, Donald Trump and then bringing in somebody as unequipped, uneducated, just complete inept as Kamala Harris. It's We don't do that. We don't shake the boat or rock the boat too much on either sides of the party. But what we do is we give a lot, and by a lot I mean almost all of our rights to these very incompetent individuals who, time and time again now, at least since this current administration has been in, we give them everything and then we act as if, oh, well, there's no way they could be that, they're just incompetent. No, no, no. I don't think they're incompetent. I think that they think that the Canadian people are so stupid, are so blind, so deaf, and so dumb that they'll actually truly believe the bullshit. We misplaced $40 billion, Roger. Like, no, no, nobody believes you. We think that you're crooks. We think that you're liars. We think that you're thieves. We don't think that you're incompetent, because incompetent would mean that you're just not intelligent. I think they're plenty intelligent. I think that they're corrupt as it gets to the core of their being. And I think when you have an alleged tie to Nazi affiliation, alleged, running your government, I think that should be enough to know that these people don't actually think that we're smart enough to notice that we put a known SS member in our parliament and stood up and clapped for him. Like, I don't think they actually think that Canadians are smart enough to catch on. I really don't. I know that sounds aggressive, Roger, but to be honest,
I agree with you. There is malfeasance, there's misfeasance, misconduct. There is pillaging of the power they have, and it is a different mess. Uh, Same mess in different piles every administration. And you're right that it doesn't matter if they're liberal or conservative, they do what they want, and a lot of it is, well, most of it is not proper nor good nor safe for the country and our
it
citizens.
it's not
Um,
only not safe, Roger, it leads and bleeds. And when I say it leads and it leads and bleeds people by saying, we're going to lead you down this path, and then we're going to bleed you dry financially, emotionally, physically. And from your family's perspective, they're going to bleed it dry as well. Because if we were to simply sit here and look at the economic state of the country and the next 30-year downturn we're about to experience, the younger generation, our generation, my son's generation, are going to bear the brunt of the overspending and the abuse of power. And even if, in which I think it's pretty clear, even if Pierre Poilievre gets into power, I have not once heard him address a lot of these subjects and concerns that you and I both have, and which I do know that a significant amount after I spoke to Jordan Peterson have been privately emailing me consistently saying, this is happening, this is happening, and this is happening. And why are you the only person, and maybe a handful others, that are saying anything? And why is nobody reaching out to you from either large scale platforms or from the government itself? And my answer is, the government has reached out to me. The Trudeau administration has reached out to me, not to speak to me, but to see if I would run in government. Now that shit is hilarious, Roger, because that's their solution. Silence individuals so that everything about them can stop coming out, and get them all on their team, i.e., my friend of my friend is, my friend of my enemy is really my friend. So they have this weird way of thinking that they can control the nation long term. And I don't see it happening, but I also don't see major improvements coming down the pipe either.
I agree. I haven't heard Pierre Poilievre talk once about what he's going to do to help persons with disabilities. Um, I haven't heard any solutions from him. He speaks very well on other issues, but there's some issues that he just doesn't come forward with, and there are also issues that the Trudeau government stays silent on as well. It's Did I cut
No,
out
you're
there?
good. You're good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the internet laid down
No
my side.
problem.
Um, And one excuse that the federal government always uses with healthcare that is an excuse and is not true, especially in terms of supports to live for the most vulnerable in the face of euthanasia and assisted suicide in this country. There was a report uh, in the early stages of C14. I can send that
Mm-hmm.
to you. It was a parliamentary committee report. And in the report, it states that uh, no person can truly consent to assisted dying unless all the options to live are presented on the table.
Which we know that's not happening.
That Yeah, I know that's not happening. It's quite the opposite, but that statement addresses national
Hmm.
concern, and the federal government can act on national concern through the national concern branch, and there's the national concern doctrine, where through the national concern branch on a matter of national concern, they can intervene in healthcare delivery. So they can what I have researched and what I found out with the federal government spending powers and the national concern branch, they can create legislation for a national um, um, individualized funding
Okay.
legislation similar to the direct payments legislation in the UK, um, similar to the NDIS in Australia, where that they can issue federal Canada Health transfers individualized to persons with disabilities to fund their individualized either their microboard or if they have an individualized funding program and they're registered as an employer.
Hmm.
But individualized Canada Health transfers they can do to fund persons with disabilities in need that need the self-directed supports that they need to be able to live at home and not end up a casualty in the euthanasia system. So anytime the federal government says, "Oh well, healthcare is strictly a provincial matter. We can't do anything about it," um, uh, in this face of like MAID and the havoc it's causing. That's not true because they can through the National Concerns Branch, and they can create a program to provide persons with disabilities and seniors and any other vulnerable persons with individualized kind of health transfers so they can either be the employer of their own care workers or through their microboard, fund the microboard, and the microboard through the individualized funding um, can can set up uh, self-directed services as well. And that brings me into microboards, which is this really hidden option in Canada that's been around for decades. I didn't even know about it till a couple months ago, and I only learned about it because ChatGPT informed me about it. So I found ChatGPT is more of a resource for finding out about healthcare options in Canada than social workers or care coordinators or doctors or anyone, which is shocking to me.
But that should say everything, because you said something right before that where you said, before somebody becomes you didn't say the word victim, but you said before somebody becomes like a casualty of the maid system. It's like that's exactly what they are. And anybody who says otherwise isn't understanding what it means to be a casualty or a victim. I said the word victim because that's what you call somebody who's been preyed upon.
Yeah, yeah. And I called them casualties because in my situation, um, I'm on
Yeah.
ground zero of what's going on, and I've been through all of it. And I understand when I see these stories in the media of the casualties that have happened and the people who are victims who are going through it. I know what they're going through
Hmm.
firsthand, and I can
And I
identify.
wanted to ask
So,
a little bit about that too, because I was curious about this, and I wanted to wait to the episode to ask this question, which was because you're in a hospital now, and because all of your time is spent not conspiring. Conspiring's the wrong word, but maybe a little conspiring to heal yourself, get yourself out of there, to get yourself safe and away from the environment. Do you get or do you face pushback from people hearing you on podcasts like this, or writing, or seeing what you're writing, or who you're contacting, who you're on the phone with? Because we've been on the phone several times, and excuse me, have these conversations. So I know people are overhearing you. So do you face concern or punishment or lack of care due to you speaking out?
I have faced reprisals in the past by the
Okay.
hospital for speaking out. I'm constantly still told to, oh, just give it up. You know, it's been 8 years and you haven't gotten access to self-directed funding, so it's not gonna happen. Uh, like I'm I'm berated a lot uh by some staff that are very abusive. Um, I still face that, and my mentality is I just got to keep on going forward. Like these people in my way creating barriers and berating me and trying to destroy me. Um, I I just can't have time for that. The only time I have is to make sure that I can secure something to save my life and not end up a casualty. And hopefully through my fight, it will benefit others as well. And anything I can do for others, I will do. Sometimes people reach out to me and they ask me, um, can you read a letter for this person to give them a bit motivation because they're going through the same thing you are? Right away, I write that letter, very heartfelt and sincere because I mean it.
Hmm.
So I do face reprisals. I still do face a lot of people saying, just give up." Since I've become very, very public, the suggestions to me of, oh, why don't you just apply for assisted? That has stopped because they know there's a lot of tension on me. So they've stopped harassing me over
But
that.
they were, right? So so let me just be very clear for those that are listening. They were harassing you to kill yourself.
Yeah, and they would bring up at my most vulnerable times. Like the first time that it was brought up to me was in November 2016. And
Right after
I
legalization.
Yeah, as
Oh.
very quickly after that, and I was expressing that I was very suicidal because of I was being berated that day. I was facing barriers and refusal to access food, and I told this person, "Would you do stuff to this
Hmm.
like this to me?" And keep in mind, I'm not getting food. Like, uh, I'm I'm very weak, and it was a really bad unit. And I said, and when you block my access to food, like this makes me very suicidal. And I was met with her saying, um, "Oh, well, the hospital has a program that can help you with that if you wanted to end your life." And it just shocked me. And
All
um,
you were asking for was access to fucking food, Roger.
Yeah, and a bit more conjured decorum that was shown to me. But and they actually convinced me early on to apply for it, so I did, and I actually had an appointment, and then um, eventually I canceled that appointment and then signaled, no, I don't want to give up. I'm going to appeal not getting the home care I need, and that I guess ticked them off. And then they came back with a forced discharge, and it was either you become property of the agencies again, we charge you north of $1,500 a day, or we just came to see if you had interest in assisted dying. And it was right after I refuted before. So after that, I was shocked and I was very suicidal again because there was like no way out. So, but then again, I was like, no, I'm going forward. I'm going forward with that. And then about a month later, nurse comes in my room and says, your appointment to be with this doctor, and it was the assessment for assisted dying. And I'm like, I already canceled that. Why isn't
What?
it canceled? And they wanted me to go to it. And I spent that whole day advocating, calling everywhere, canceling this appointment. Finally, it gets canceled. And I thought, okay, it's very clear to them now that I'm not interested, and I'm going to fight and gain access to the self-directed funding home care I need. So I get the flu. I'm in an IV. I'm very sick. And this was in late January of 2018. Uh, this nurse is actually training a student nurse. They clean my IV, bandage it. They're supposed to come back later to give me some meds. So he leaves with her. Then they knock on my door coming back and are doing a so-called safety check, asking me if I have any thoughts of suicide. And I'm quite honest because I've been at a hospital. I think they have my best interests in mind. And if I told them the truth, well, yes, like at least they'll know. And maybe
They'll help me
like
or
they'll,
do something to like improve my
yeah,
mental health.
or help advocate for me to get self-directed funding. But no, I'm actually met with, oh, well, if you don't get self-directed funding, you could just apply for assisted. Like, you know what I mean? And
But you're not terminally ill, Roger. Like you are not technically definable under a condition at this point where, especially in 2016, like if you have expressed to someone that I'm suicidal, you are not a candidate for suicide. Like,
but you have to understand that back in C14 and when C14 was passed, the recently foreseeable definition was so vague
right.
no doctor really knew what it is, and things would happen. Like the Ottawa Citizen released an article on a woman with cerebellar ataxia in Ottawa that was receiving aid. All of a sudden, cerebellar ataxia to everyone became reasonably foreseeable, and that put a target on my back.
I've certainly had cases where I felt compelled to provide MAID against my better clinical judgment because the law did not adequately protect.
Is that the patient's natural death is in what's called the reasonably foreseeable future. And I don't know what that means either.
No doctor that I know has ever understood what that means. Your natural death must be reasonably foreseeable.
Give an example of a mental illness that could meet criteria of foreseeable natural death.
You could have a circumstance of anorexia.
I can call up the local chapter of Dying with Dignity Canada and say, I've got a lady, she's in such and such a facility, and she needs 2 witnesses. And they will send out 2 volunteer witnesses to show up at the time and date that I request. I don't know if that's really a great safeguard built into the law, but there it is.
Remember, the disagreement doesn't mean you must stop. Disagreement amongst colleagues.
Found another assessor who decided they were eligible, and that person was helped to die.
You can have a reasonable but mistaken belief about something and still not be in trouble with the law. There is no certainty or unanimity required. There is not perfection required. So people can face disagreement from colleagues and still proceed.
There's a 5-year waiting list for the specialist in your area. Are you willing to continue suffering for the 5 years? And if they said no, then that would be what I would say was irremediable.
It's an astonishing thing to me. If the treatment isn't available, Dr. Weeb saying you can't get in to see someone, I'm astonished, wondering, would any of you say, I'm going to die because I can't get the right care?
When Bill C-14 first came out, none of us were prepared. It just came out, and then suddenly we were supposed to be able to provide this. And the end result was, I think there were cases of people who received MAID who maybe didn't need to. Then Bill C-7 passed, and there were actually more cases, and those we've been hearing about all over the news.
Last year, a shocking 1 in 30 deaths in the country were due to assisted suicide.
Doesn't this speak to the problem? And I don't know, whichever side you're on, and that is that people approach this either strongly for or against. And does that mean that you are not as objective as you might otherwise be?
Obviously, I'm biased, and I think it's a good thing to have assisted dying.
That kind of brings me to the final thing I want to talk about, which is why it's important to be a member of an organization like this and what role you guys, as members and participants in Dying with Dignity, can play.
I think everything is subject to mistake. I don't think we're going to get it perfect.
Is the dead donor rule even relevant? Best use of my organs if I'm going to receive a medically assisted death might be to not first kill me and then retrieve my organs.
Angry family members are our greatest risk.
Back when C14 was certified and a criteria was made, reasonably foreseeable was so vague and had an ever-expanding definition. And to this day, it's still expanded. Even with track 1 and track 2 in C7, persons are track hopping from track 2 to track 1 very often. So back in 2016, 2017, reasonably foreseeable also in the courts was expanded because there was this case of a woman with osteoarthritis that Justice Paul Perel ruled that she should have access to assisted dying. And she was more than a decade away from a reasonably foreseeable death. So that expanded it. It just kept on being expanded. So even before C7, like people who were vulnerable were targeted because the criteria was so vague. And in my situation, like I said, that article in the Citizen about cerebellar ataxia being a reason why one was approved for MAID and all these other expansion things going on, people in the healthcare industry, I guess, see vulnerable people, and I don't know why, but they propose assisted dying, and there were headlines about the case of Candace Lewis as well.
Yeah.
And that happened, I think, before me. And Candace Lewis was approached in the hospital, and her mother as well, by a physician. So even back then, there were a lot of reports of this happening. And I don't know if sometimes on the other side of the spectrum, I'm talking the healthcare side, if it's malice or frustration, or they just they have compassion without wisdom. I don't know what it is, but for someone to come out and say, oh, well, if you don't get self-directed funding, you can just apply for assisted. One, that shocked me. Two, it's traumatized me. Three, it completely devalues my life, and it makes me feel like I don't matter at all. And four, this was the fourth time that someone was doing it to me at the hospital. So at that point, it was like I'm not even giving this guy time of day, and I'm just going forward with trying to get the self-directed funding home care I need. But I mean, for other people like Alan Nichols, um, he was in, and I keep in mind I'm in the mental health ward when this is happening in 2016, 2017. Um, so the case of Alan Nichols, I'm sure you're familiar with his case. I can identify with what he went through. Alone in a mental health ward. I don't know if anyone brought MAID up to him or if he saw advertisements of it, but um, they eventually gave it to them, and there was nothing his family could do to stop it. He was totally isolated and coerced into
Which
it.
is wild
So
about his particular case, because if I'm not wrong, he was the individual who had depression, and he was also suffering from deaf. He was deaf, correct?
yeah,
Yeah. So that to me in particular hits a nerve because I am losing my hearing and I suffer from the same diagnoses as him. Although I had a support system and a network around me to make sure to uplift me while I'm going through these processes, where not every Canadian, not every individual is given that level of support and that care due to one factor or another. But to me, the fact that we find it acceptable to put people in positions to deteriorate their mental health status even further, and then when they're at a weak point, we offer, or lightly dangle the carrot or hear it in a pass by, because a lot of the response I've been getting, Roger, from doctors who have come at me, and actually not that many, which has been interesting. They've actually more often than not have said, "Oh my God, thank you for outing Ellen Wiebe or discussing Stephanie Green's, her just very aggressive stance toward euthanasia." But anybody really aggressive towards anybody who has taken the stance that nobody should have to go through any form of suffering, because to go through suffering means to have built resiliency in your life on a level that you don't get without putting pressure. Because I grew up with the saying that diamonds are made by pressure, and where you grow and the bar you hit is directly representative of the amount of pressure and weight you put on your shoulders. And so to say that anybody who's going through any sort of suffering should be a candidate, it bothers me. So these doctors have come to me and said, Kelsey, this is happening at a scary rate that even we're not necessarily reporting on their death certificates as made. And that to me tells me that there's misrepresentation and reporting going on in this nation. And then you have provinces like Quebec who knowingly and admittedly killed 15 people who do not qualify under the legislation and their law and how it is currently written. But there has been no reason for them to stop this dead in its tracks and go, we cannot have this. You hear the opposite in Parliament, right? You hear the opposite on the Senate floor. Canadians should have the right to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, Canadians should have the right to live and thrive and heal, not be picked up by a eugenics pushing individual and lightly say it when they're out of earshot, just enough that they can't legally be charged with, abiding or even pushing people down the direction of euthanasia. They're very careful how they do it. They do it so you can hear it in another room. They do it so that you can hear it down the hall. Or if they're really bold, they'll say it to your face. And I had this conversation with Kayla where she said to me, Kelsey, I was in the room. They offered me euthanasia 3 times, and a gentleman had come in from a car accident who looked like he was not going to survive from the accident. His wife was on the way, and in between then they offered him euthanasia. The doctor right then and there in a vulnerable moment said, this is going to be too painful. This is what we can do for you. And he said, I want to wait for my wife. And they offered that to him then.
It's a country where they tell everyone to give up, to submit to challenges, to not do treatments. And you talk about the reporting deficiencies, well, also in those Quebec Commission reports, every report every year, the amount of euthanasia deaths reported by doctors doesn't match the amount done by institutions. There's always a gap.
And the prescriptions too. The prescriptions are not, when you prescribe the euthanasia drug, they're not lining up with the death toll.
Yeah, there's unexplained deaths happening in the reporting numbers, and they don't even know how to explain it. And no one has any concern to do an investigation or maybe put things on pause. It's just full steam ahead. And I saw an article yesterday where Quebec in the fall is going to legalize advance requests way before the federal government does. So Quebec is always about charging through this, and then the Trudeau government is about following the charge. So with the reporting issues too, it's all self-reported. So with self-reporting also around the world in other jurisdictions, like in Belgium, Dr. I think you pronounce it Dr. Kazin, Belgium physician, admitted to the press that he doesn't report to the commissions the euthanasia deaths he provides. And he was saying this to one of the commissioners who was interviewing him. And still that commission, they didn't reprimand him, they didn't put any more strict guidelines. So even in Belgium, they don't really know how many euthanasia deaths happen. Same thing in Switzerland. It's all self-reporting. They can't
Yep.
tell you how many assisted suicides have happened in their country. All these figures from in our country and other countries about assisted suicide euthanasia deaths that happen, and the data they're looking at and saying, oh, well, things are working great. Well, no, that data is unreliable because there's a lack of reporting. There's no transparency in the reporting. And this also brings me to a claim that Dr. James Downer made in one of his publications, where he said only high socioeconomic status individuals seek and receive MAID. Low socioeconomic status individuals do not seek MAID. And he came out with this report in his research. But then when I was looking at it, I said, well, that's not true because the hospital that I'm in, LHSC, released their own study, and it shows that in the hospital, a significantly higher amount of low socioeconomic status individuals seek MAID, and then of those that seek MAID, the uh, I think it was 34.2% of the low SES, that stands for social economic status, individuals receive MAID, and that is basically equal to the number of high SES that receive MAID.
And just for those that are listening, that document that he's speaking to is in the Medical Assistance in Dying. It is with the journal.sagepub.com. It is titled The Socioeconomical Status in Medical Assistance in Dying, a Regional Descriptive Study. This was done by Manny Tran and a few other individuals. But when you look, it's very, very simply, if you just, for people who don't like to read medical papers or any sort of research papers, all you have to do is go to the abstract, and I want you to look at where it says in bold conclusion, a disproportionate number of requests for a MAID assessment at the LHSC came from lower SES patients. However, similar proportions of patients who requested MAID from each SES group received aid in dying. Future research should be explored as to why a disproportionately high number of low SES patients requested MAID at LHSC. What that tells me is exactly what you've stated, that Downer is a liar. But we know that. And so this is not, we don't have to argue over this fact. We can prove it. We can look at it, that very often you've got these individuals that are making the laws, the regulations, the rulings in Canada around these situations. And these people are the ones that are not only pushing alongside Dying with Dignity Canada and the lobbying arms of the government to push this forward, but really simply, you can look at this paper on the cmaj.ca. It's the commentary section under what drives requests for MAID. James Downer wrote a report with Susan McDonald and Sandy Buchman, and I would take anything that this man says with a grain of salt. He puts a lot of references, but the other thing I need you to understand is that this man has a history of going after the vulnerable population now, what feels like for a long time. And I'm glad that you critiqued his studies, because it's very clear that from this report to the one that is stated, like I just read from, what he's saying is just factually untrue. And it is factually provable that it is untrue. It's no different than when I had this conversation with you. I called you the day after Stephanie Green decided to try to drag Jordan Peterson and I through the coals. What was hilarious and pathetic attempt at best was showing how little a supposed doctor was able to, I don't know, break an interview down minute by minute by minute. But then when you do your own research on Stephanie Green and you find out that she spends every waking minute of all of her life trying to kill more people using this program, it's really hard to listen to people like her and James Downer, whose research we can easily prove is false.
Yes, and also another fact about James Downer is he has conflicts of interest. So, sure, so he can say that he's not the head of the clinical board of Dying with Dignity now, and that's in his past, but that's still an anchor to a conflict of interest where he has had support for that group. And also, I would love Dr. Dunn to explain to me why he still allows Dying with Dignity to use his past recruitment speech videos on their YouTube page to benefit their organization. I mean, if you're going to declare you have no conflict of interest because you're not associated anymore with that organization, shouldn't you also disclose the fact that you're allowing them to still use the material that you created with them for recruitment, for them to use currently? Like, he should tell them, Dying with Dignity, take down my recruitment speech video that I did for you, because when you write reports about MAID and gaslight victims and casualties and their families of the horrors of what's going on and tell everyone this MAID regime is perfect, everything's okay, don't worry. Only wealthy people are seeking MAID and they have access to support. There's no coercion. But on the other side, you're lying your past organization, Dying with Dignity, to use your recruitment video speech to up their status to gain more members and donations. That's a conflict of interest. So I would like him to ask Dying with Dignity to take down his recruitment speech, and then maybe he can claim he doesn't have a conflict of interest. But in my mind, right now, I believe he does. And reports like he released about the SES, um, uh, that just
Are just factually
it's
untrue. They're just factually untrue. And that's the whole point, though, that I guess I've been trying to discuss here with several different people about it is if we were dealing with an organization or a government that wasn't caught lying every time it opened its mouth or typed something on paper or said something on camera, it would be so much easier to just say, why are you saying this? But when we understand that, was Dying with Dignity is one of the largest nonprofits in this country. They single-handedly train through CAMMAP all of the doctors on the legal routes, how to not only skate them, the loopholes and ways to find your way around them, but then they also talk to them about how when you take someone's life, it's euphoric and beautiful and peaceful and all of these really nasty lies that we can prove are not. And I was speaking to, I wanted to wait to ask you this question because I want your opinion on this. So I was speaking to one of my doctors who is a 40-year psychiatrist. Okay. This guy is like tried, tested, and true, served in the military in Bosnia, Rwanda, has seen more death. Well, maybe not as much death as, Ellen Wiebe, but, more genocide, more preventable death than anybody else I know. And I asked him a few questions about this because one of my questions I wanted to know, why is nobody asking this? Why has nobody just asked this question? Dying with Dignity claims that euthanasia or MAID or whatever word you want to use to make yourself feel better about killing someone, that it is a painless death and it is a death with dignity. So I said to him, looking externally at the brain, just alone, has anybody ever tested the soma to sensory cortex where the pain and touch, etc., is perceived? And if there's no activity there, then there can be no pain felt or perceived. But we don't know if anyone has ever tested someone while they are euthanizing them. So I guess my question to you, Roger, is how is it that an organization with $8 million on average, one of the largest lobbying arms of the Liberal government, how is it that they can make a claim? Because me, being a company owner, if I put a claim on a package, Roger, or I put a claim in a book, or I put a claim on a podcast and I cannot back it up, that you can get sued for. So how is it that Dying with Dignity is claiming that this is painless and it is a death of dignity, and it is in no way, shape, or form causing distress to them. If we do not have the testing, the research to look at the brain and say, yes, we know for sure they didn't feel this, because the only testing we currently have is the post-mortem autopsies and what happens to the lungs after they fill with bloody froth from a pulmonary edema from having the drugs pushed into their body.
I saw your interview with Dr. Joe Zippett on that, and I think the answer relating to your other question is much the same um, in the area of checking the lungs after death. We don't investigate the assisted deaths after they happen. There's no examination similar to what Dr. Zippert was saying, that there's very little examination or investigation about the lungs after using that drug. It's with assisted death in this country, everything is very vague and pushed forward and not looked at twice. And there should be more investigation, and there should be more in-depth coroner's reports, but there's not. And even when wrongful deaths happen and families bring it to the police or try to get the records to a privacy commission, they reach with brick walls. And yeah, so all these claims that they make, how it's quick and painless, and it's a death with dignity and so forth. Uh, no doubt they're lies, can be proven lies, uh, but they get away with it because we're in a country that doesn't do the research or doesn't even care to investigate for that. And another thing I want to add to that is they say it's dying with dignity, but when you're receiving euthanasia or assisted suicide because you're lacking supports or treatments to live, or you don't even have the right to try. If you're a terminal person, if there's a trial medication in the States that could help uh, you live longer, that's not a death or dignity, that's a death of coercion. And no matter how you sell it to the families, oh, your family member is dying with dignity. At the end of the day, that's not a choice that they made. That's a coercion into euthanasia and assisted suicide.
But that's the other thing I'm trying to get others in this country to understand. It is not dignified. It is not, most of the time, their choice. It is pushed on the vulnerable population in this nation, and nobody seems to fucking get it, Roger. They are not coming to you and saying, we've exhausted all options. We've given you everything we've got. We've done every research test. We've done all of the new medications. We've done all of the research on this. We've done everything. We've put you in your home. We've made you comfortable. And you have come to us and said, I don't want to kill myself, but I also don't want to suffer like this. That's not what this is. This is malice. This is dark energy. This is intent to harm. This is intent to take you off of the face of the earth when you just need someone to fucking fight for you. And I get so riled up about it, Roger, because the amount of people who have been killed with this that don't need to die. And the people come at me on social and say, well, the median age is 70. Okay, cool. When does somebody start to, if they haven't had a terminal illness, become a burden onto the healthcare system? In their elderly age. So instead of giving them what they deserve, which is they've done their time, they've worked their life, they've had their babies, they're retired, and now they've come down with cancer, or now they've developed another disease. And our first response to them is, you are too much of a problem, so why don't we start talking about other ways to end your life? The fact that we have gotten to a point, which I never thought we would get to, I'm going to say something right now, Roger, that might throw you a little, so bear with me. I used to fight up against an enemy that valued death more than it values life. You're currently seeing it flood into the UK, seeing it flood in Toronto, seeing it flood into every other nation in the world. And the thing that I said at the very beginning, when I got home, and this is something I wish I stuck to my guns on, is when somebody values death over life, you cannot win. This government values death more than they value quality of life. And they're showing their hand by the way they are treating people in this nation when they come and ask for help. Anybody who has a suicidal ideation at any point in their life should not qualify for MAID, because it tells me that they are not enough in a right mind to know that this is permanent.
True, and also, no person who starves himself for MAID should get it, because then you're leaving a loophole and you're encouraging people to purposely sabotage their own body when their mind isn't thinking straight. So and my father fought in front lines of World War II, so um uh he also told me in the front lines when he fought the German soldiers, they didn't look like they were human beings. Their eyes were just pure evil. And so the regime that values death more than life, you saw what the Nazi Germans did with the Action T4 program, and I know that it turns a lot of people off making comparisons, but you have to look at history or it repeats itself. So.
And that's what's happening right now. And this is why I use the word eugenics so aggressively. And people say, Kelsey, do you think that's going to turn people off? I said, it only will turn you off until you realize the reality of what it is. And so something that we will be doing, and I do want to do at some point outside of your hospital, is I'm going to take a page from a good friend, Billboard Chris. I don't know if you know who Billboard Chris is, Roger, but this is go back and look 2 weeks ago from my podcast. His name is Billboard Chris Elston. And he is somebody that all he did, man, was put a billboard on his body and started standing there. And all it said was, young adolescents cannot consent to puberty blockers. And the reason that's so important is because social media can censor you. The government can censor us. YouTube for sure censors us. Anybody else can choose, but guerrilla marketing works. And the thing that we need people to understand is that the way that they are being educated around assisted suicide and euthanasia is not factually true. It is happening more than to just the elderly. I was on a podcast, Roger, it came out last week, with the Dr. John Deloney show in America. And he called me on a Sunday and said, I have somebody who wants to do the show this week. She is from Manitoba. She is early 20s, and she has gone into the hospital and asked to die. Not because she had a terminal illness, Roger, but because she had been taken advantage of by a bunch of men, where she had had bad relationships and she felt nobody cared for her or loved her anymore. So I got brought on the call to talk to her about this, and we got her into counseling that day, thanks to Angelina from the Delta Hospice Society. And we have gotten others the same sort of counseling, because what they need counseling for is the fact that the place that was supposed to heal them and save them and protect them from themselves is actually offering to kill them. That's terrifying. That's so beyond terrifying. So my point in saying is that the everyday person thinks that MAID is some beautiful thing because they have been sold a bill of goods that is a false lie. It is a falsehood that is provable on paper. And thanks to people like you, Roger, you have been able to not only put together an insane amount of data for me to digest and go through, but you're showing other people that you don't qualify, homie. You don't. You don't. You're too full of life. You're too ready to fight. And I know that you struggle. But because you stayed with us, people are going to get to hear this message. And this is not your only time on the show. This is only part one, folks. So if you And we're going to get into a little more here before we go, but just listen, this is part one of a lot of different episodes we're going to be doing with Roger around this. And the call to action I'm going to have right before Roger continues a little bit further is that I need you guys to do Roger a huge favor here. Because of the court cases and because of the financial place that Roger is in, due to the incompetence of the Canadian government, due to the lack of support for individuals with disabilities and those that are vulnerable, Roger has to fundraise $100,000. And you can do that by donating at helproger.ca. He also has music on YouTube that I do recommend you go listen to. He does have some of the best records I've ever seen on this subject and is one of the most knowledgeable people I know outside of Alex Schadenberg in this area. And it is nothing but an honor to have had our relationship just fall in together out of complete fluke. So before we go, Roger, on this episode, can you tell people a little more of what you want them to know? And then on the next episode, we're going to start from there.
Well, first, I'd just like to mention that it's not only the government who's proactive on death, it's also been the courts.
Okay.
And recently there was a decision in the Ontario Court of Appeal where they made the first positive charter right to healthcare. And it was for I don't know a lot about this surgery issue, so I won't speak a lot about it. Just that an elective surgery now, it's called bottom surgery, is
Yes.
a charter right under Section 7 secured to the person. And what I take issue with that is not that elective surgery is a positive charter rate, because I believe there should be positive charter rates in healthcare. I take issue with life-saving surgery and treatments and services for other health populations that are not charter rights, like cancer treatments that are life savings. The courts have ruled that there's no charter right to that. Services for disability persons to live, there's no positive charter rights for that. So if you're going to give one community a positive charter right to healthcare, again, which I agree with the decision, I think the elective surgery, bottom surgery, it should be a positive charter right. But I also think that the courts for the other communities, such as the disabled community and the community of cancer patients, that we should have positive charter rights to healthcare too, and the court should reconsider the rejection of us as well. And then, secondly, I'd just like to say that I'd like to tell you and everyone that part of the reason why I'm a big part of the reason why I'm still alive today is because I have a passion to live, and everyone should hold dear their passion to live. Don't give up on your dreams and goals. And I wrote this song like over a decade ago called "Limitless with Limitations" when I was dealing with cerebellar ataxia, and it was taking away my ability to do a lot of things. And I would still live with the disease. I learned how to live with it. I kept a positive mind frame, and my my definition of what my passion to live was limitless with limitations. So no matter what limitations anyone has, they can still be limitless in achieving the passion and goals to live that they they desire and they have dreams for. So I don't know if you want to close this episode off with playing the Limitless with Limitation lyric video that I made.
Do I have permission to add it to our YouTube video? Because I know they're going to be cranky if I do. So
Oh, you do. YouTube has already approved it because they made it with Pixels and Pixabay, which is all like free. And so I just chipped away at making a lyric video, and like when I finally get the self-directed funding home care I need to live, I would like to do another music album. and there's a lot more songs that I would like to give to the world, and maybe some people would like it and find it inspiring or enjoy the beat. I just like making people happy, and that's part of my passion in life as well.
Roger, I have to tell you, meeting you, knowing you, getting the privilege of getting to know you and know your work and how passionate you are, it goes without saying. It's an honor to see somebody that's willing to fight for their life the way that you are, because so many people are so quick to quit. And I've been suicidal, and I've been to where it hurts so bad that you don't want to breathe anymore. But you are the true definition of resiliency. And I'm so grateful that you are here and that you keep having the passion for life. I know that you will get the home care. I know that you will make more music. And I'm just so blessed that you are here to show the rest of the world that just because you have an illness or you have a condition, at no point does that mean that your life is any less worth living and fighting and dying for than anybody else on the face of this earth. And if there's anything that I've learned about war and coming back to another nation and home, is that you have to live a life worth dying for. And if you don't live a life worth dying for, so many other people will lose their lives. You have to find something to fight for. And corruption and issues around people being killed when they didn't want to die, they just wanted the pain to stop. We need to stand up and we need to do better for this nation. Otherwise, our children are on the chopping block. And people like you that have so much to give to this world will not get the chance to do it. So, Roger, please keep fighting. You are not alone ever. The rest of us are constantly here praying for you and seeing you in the light, and somebody that can genuinely change the world on this. People just need to hear your story a little bit more. So, in saying that, this is not going to be the only episode. We've got a part 2 of this coming up where we're going to go into everything else around assisted dying, socioeconomical related issues, some more critiques. We're going to go into the malfeasance, the judicial misconduct. We're also going to hit some of the other misconduct that the Trudeau administration, under the handling of legislation C-14 and C-7, as well as the Trudeau government's history with legalization around euthanasia. And lastly, we're going to target the charter rights and some of those issues that I wish the rest of the world could see. And they will once that episode drops. So Roger, thank you so much for your time, my friend. And I will put everything in the show notes. Guys, go check out helproger.ca. Get him the help he needs and so deserves, because that's really where we're at. He deserves your support. And Roger, you and I will chat after this to get the second one booked, my friend. Is there any last words you have for everyone?
I'd just like to thank you very much, Kelsey, and I'd just like to say that you're inspirational as well, and you're a wonderful person, and I look up to you as well, and I hope our country can begin healing and repairing the damage that has been done to our most vulnerable populations.
And they will, and it will, because of people like you, my friend. So Roger, you stick with me. Everyone else, we'll see you on the next one.
Limitless with limitations. Oh, limitless with limitations. That we are limited. We can make anything happen. Yeah, limitless with limitations. Though I am limited, I can make anything happen. We may suffer from heavy self-doubt. We fight so much negative it makes us want to shout. But did you know this secret, my friends? All is achieved if you see it to the end. Take a picture with your camera. Take a picture of me. Let our passion inspire you to change the whole world you see. Take a pose of excellence and positive slope. Never give up, always keep the hope.
Take a picture with your camera. Take a picture of me. Let our passion inspire you to change the whole world you see. Steps of excellence and positivity.
Ooh, limitless with limited